Hello, welcome to Bible study time and welcome to my quiet time Bible study. This is the time where I invite you to come and join me in the comfort of my prayer room, where we discuss different topics to do with the Most High Creator God, the God of all gods, the God of all spirits. And I just want to say happy holidays to all of you and those of you, who have lost loved ones. I know it can sting a little bit more this time of the year, and so I'm sending out thoughts of warmth and comfort for you, and I have been lifting those of you who've requested it up in prayer, and I just want to mention that I am so sorry for your loss, and I extend my condolences from my family to yours. This week we are continuing reading through the book of Jasher, and last week we read through quite the long chapter. We went through chapters 11 and 12. Those are the chapters that we ended off with. I did record 2 videos. I'm probably just going to record 1 for this week and then 2 for the next week. But yeah, that was a long chapter. So this week I just want to get right into reading, and so we will be continuing reading from our book, The Complete 54 Book Apocrypha. It's the 2022 version. This is one of my newer Bible study tools. And so I know some of those of you who are new have asked me to share my Bible study tools with you. I will do an updated Bible study tools video series in the new year. For now, though, if you go to my website, QTBiblestudy.com, there will be a list under one of the drop-down menu options that you have, Bible study tools. I think it's called Bible study tools. Yeah, and so I have a list with links to many of my Bible study tools that I use, but I will be making an updated Bible study tools video in the near future in 2024. That's all I can promise right now. I don't have any dates. But for those of you, the few of you who do have this book, who've mentioned that you have it, I'm going to continue reading. So let's get right into it. I'll be on page 339. Let me get my glasses on. The writing is tiny, and this is a really long book. Quite the project to take on, but I do like to finish what I start. So let's continue reading in verse number 1 of chapter 13, located on page 339. And Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram, and all the souls of his household, and went with them from Kasdim to go to the land of Canaan. And when they came as far as the land of Haran, they remained there, for it was exceedingly good land for pasture, and of sufficient extent for those who accompanied them. And the people of the land of Haran saw that Abram was good and upright with God and men, and that the Lord his God was with him. And some of the people of the land of Haran came and joined Abram, and he taught them the instruction of the Lord and his ways. And these men remained with Abram in his house, and they adhered to him. And Abram remained in the land those years, and at the expiration of 3 years the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out from Kasdim and delivered you from the hands of all your enemies. And now therefore, if you will listen to my voice and keep my commands, my statutes, and my laws, then I will cause your enemies to fall before you, and I will multiply your seed like the stars of the heaven, and I will send my blessing on all the works of your hands, and you will lack nothing. Arise now, take your wife and all belonging to you, and go to the land of Canaan and remain there, and I will be God to you there, and I will bless you. And Abram rose and took his wife and all belonging to him, and he went to the land of Canaan as the Lord had told him. And Abram was over 50 years old when he went from Haran. And Abram came to the land of Canaan and dwelt in the midst of the city, and he pitched his tent there among the children of Canaan, inhabitants of the land. And the Lord appeared to Abram when he came to the land of Canaan and said to him, "This is the land which I gave to you and your seed, like the stars of the heaven, and I will give all the lands which you see to your seed for an inheritance." And Abram built an altar in the place where God had spoken to him. And Abram called the name of the Lord there. And Abram called on the name of the Lord there. At that time, at the end of 3 years of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, in the year Noah died, which was the 58th year of the life of Abram, and all the days that Noah lived were 950 years, and he died. And Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, he, his wife, and all belonging to him, and all those that accompanied him, together with those that joined him from the people of the land. But Abram's brother Nahor and his father Terah and Lot the son of Haran, and all helping to them, dwelt in Haran. In the 5th year of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and all the cities of the plain revolted from the power of Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, for all the kings of the cities of the plain had served Chedorlaomer for 12 years and gave him a yearly tax. But in those days, in the 13th year, they rebelled against him. And in the 10th year of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, there was war between Nimrod, king of Shinar, and Chedorlaomer, king of Elam. And Nimrod came to fight with the king of Elam and to subdue him. For the king of Elam was at that time one of the princes of the hosts of Nimrod. And when all the people at the tower were dispersed, and those that remained there were also scattered on the face of the earth, the king of Elam went to the land of Elam and reigned over it and rebelled against his Lord. And in those days when Nimrod saw that the cities of the plain had rebelled, he came with pride and anger to war with the king of Elam, Chedorlaomer. And Nimrod assembled all his priests and subjects, about 700,000 men, and went against the king of Elam. And the king of Elam went out to meet him with 5,000 men, and they prepared for battle in the valley of Babel, which is between Elam and Shinar. And all those kings fought there. And Nimrod and his people were smitten before the people of Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and there fell from Nimrod's men about 600,000, and the king's son Mardon fell among them. And Nimrod fled and returned in shame and disgrace to his land, and he was under subjection to the king of Elam for a long time. And the king of Elam returned to his land and sent princes of his host to the kings that dwelt around him, to Arioch, king of Elasar, and Tidal, king of Goyim, and made a covenant with them, and they were all obedient to his commands. And it was in the 15th year of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, which is the 70th year of the life of Abram, that the Lord appeared to Abram in the year, and he said to him, "I am the Lord who brought you from Ur-Kasdim to give you this land for an inheritance. Now therefore walk before me and be perfect and keep my commands, for I will give this land to you and to your seed for an inheritance, from the river Mizrahim to the great river Euphrates. And you will come to your fathers in peace and in good age, and the 4th generation will return here in this land." And he called on the name of the Lord who appeared to him, and he brought up sacrifices on the altar. Just wanted to mention one thing I find so very interesting is that every time it mentions that Abram called on the name of the Lord, it actually has name written in capital letters. So I'm wondering if that was to replace the Tetragrammaton YH WH or YHVH, which would be Yahweh. Very interesting. I'll have to research that a little bit. So I'll just repeat that verse. And Abram built an altar, and he called on the name of the Lord who appeared to him, and he brought up sacrifice on the altar to the Lord. And at that time, Abram returned and went to Haran to see his father and mother and his father's household. And Abram and his wife and all belonging to him returned to Haran, and Abram dwelt in Haran 5 years. And many of the people of Haran, about 72 men, followed Abram, and Abram taught them the instructions of the Lord and his ways, and he taught them to know the Lord. In those days the Lord appeared to Abram in Haran and said to him, Behold, I spoke to you these 20 years back, saying, Go out from your land, from your birthplace, and from your father's house to the land which I have shown you, to give it to you and to your children. For there, in that land, I will bless you and make you a great generation and make your name great. And in you, the families of the earth will be blessed. Now therefore, arise, go out from this place, you, your wife, and all belonging to you, also everyone born in your house, and all the souls you have made in Haran. And bring them out with you from here, and rise to return to the land of Canaan. And Abram arose and took his wife Sarai and all belonging to him, and all that were born to him in his house, and the souls which they had made in Haran, and they came out to go up to the land of Canaan. And Abram went and returned to the land of Canaan according to the word of the Lord. And Lot, the son of his brother Haran, went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he went out from Haran to return to the land of Canaan. And he came to the land of Canaan according to the word of the Lord to Abram. And he pitched his tent, and he dwelt in the plain of Mamre. And his brother's son Lot and all belonging to him were with him. And the Lord appeared to Abram and said, To your seed I will give you this land. And he built an altar there to the Lord who appeared to him, which is still in the plains of Mamre to this day. Moving on to chapter number 14, verse 1. In those days there was a wise man in the land of Shinar who had understanding in all wisdom and all, I'm just going to grab my light because it's getting kind of dark. One moment. In those days there was a wise man in the land of Shinar who had understanding in all wisdom and of a beautiful appearance, but he was poor and indignant. His name was Rechaon, and he was hard set to support himself, and he resolved to go to Egypt to Osiris the son of Anon, king of Egypt, to show the king his wisdom, for perhaps he might find grace in his sight to raise him up and give him maintenance. And Rechaon did so. And when Rechaon came to Egypt, he asked the inhabitants of Egypt concerning the king, and the inhabitants of Egypt told him the custom of the king, for it was the custom of the king of Egypt that he went from his royal palace and was seen abroad only one day in the year, and after that the king would return to his palace to remain there. And on the day when the king went out, he passed judgment in the land, and everyone having a suit came before the king that day to obtain his request. And when Rechaon heard of the custom in Egypt, and that he could not come into the presence of the king, he grieved greatly and was very sorrowful. And in the evening, Rechaon went out and found a house in ruins, formerly a bakehouse in Egypt. And he remained there all night in bitterness of soul, and pinched with hunger, and sleep was removed from his eyes. And Rechaon considered within himself what he should do in the town until the king made his appearance, and how he might maintain himself there. And he rose in the morning and walked around, and met in his way those who sold vegetables and various sorts of seed, with which they supplied the inhabitants. And Rechaon wished to do the same in order to get a maintenance in the city, but he was unacquainted with the custom of the people, and he was like a blind man among them. And he went and obtained vegetables to sell them for his support, and the rabble assembled around him and ridiculed him and took his vegetables from him and left him nothing. And he rose up from there in bitterness of soul and went sighing to the bakehouse in which he had remained all the night before, and he slept there the second night. And on the night he reasoned within himself again, how could he save himself from starvation? And he devised a scheme how to act. And he rose up in the morning and acted ingenuously, and went and hired 30 strong men of the rabble, carrying their war instruments in their hand, and he led them to the top of the Egyptian tomb. And he placed them there, and he commanded them, saying, Thus says the king, strengthen yourselves and be valiant men, and let no man be buried here until 200 pieces of silver are given, and then he may be buried. And those men did according to the order of Rechaon to the people of Egypt the whole of the year. And in 8 months' time, Rechaon and his men gathered great riches of silver and gold, and Rechaon took a great quantity of horses and other animals, and he hired more men, and he gave them horses, and they remained with him. And when the year came around, at the time the king went out into the town, all the inhabitants of Egypt assembled together to speak to him concerning the work of Rechaon and his men. And the king went out on the appointed day, and all the Egyptians came before him and cried to him, saying, May the king live forever. What is this thing you do in the town to your servants, not to permit a dead body to be buried until so much silver and gold are given? Was there ever the like to this done in the whole earth from the days of the former kings? Yes, even from the days of Adam to this day, that the dead should not be buried except only for a set price? We know it to be the custom of the kings to take a yearly tax from the living, but you do not only do this, but you also exact tax from the dead day to day. Now, O king, we can no longer bear this, for the whole city is ruined on this account. And do you not know it? And when the king heard all they had spoken, he was very angry, and his anger burned within him at this affair, for he had known nothing of it. And the king said, Who and where is he that dares to do this wicked thing in my land without my command? Surely you will tell me. And they told him all the works of Rechaon and his men, and the king's anger was aroused, and he ordered Rechaon and his men to be brought before him. And Rechaon took about 1,000 children, sons and daughters, and clothed them in silk and embroidery, and he set them on horses and sent them to the king by means of his men. This book is really heavy. And he took also a great quantity of silver and gold and precious stones, and a strong and beautiful horse as a present for the king, with which he came before the king and bowed down to the earth before him. And the king, his servants, and all the inhabitants of Egypt wondered at the work of Rechaon, and they saw his riches and the present that he had brought to the king, and it greatly pleased the king, and he wondered at it. And when Rechaon sat before the king asked him concerning all his works, and Rechaon spoke all his words wisely before the king, his servants, and all the inhabitants of Egypt. And when the king heard the words of Rechaon and his wisdom, Rechaon found grace in his sight, and he met with grace and kindness from all the servants of the king and from all the inhabitants of Egypt on account of his wisdom and excellent speeches. And from that time they loved him exceedingly. And the king answered and said to Rechaon, your name will no longer be Rechaon, but Pharaoh will be your name, since you exalted a tax from the dead. And he called his name Pharaoh. And the king and his subjects loved Rechaon for his wisdom, and they consulted with all the inhabitants of Egypt to make him perfect under the king. And all the inhabitants of Egypt and its wise men did so, and it was made a law in Egypt. And they made Rechaon Pharaoh perfect under Osiris, king of Egypt. And Rechaon Pharaoh governed over Egypt, daily administering justice to the whole city. But Osiris the king would judge the people of the land one day in the year when he went out to make his appearance. And Rechaon Pharaoh cunningly usurped the government of Egypt, and he exacted a tax from all the inhabitants of Egypt. And all the inhabitants of Egypt greatly loved Rechaon Pharaoh, and they made a decree to call every king that should reign over them and their seed in Egypt Pharaoh. Therefore, all the kings that reigned in Egypt from that time forward were called Pharaoh to this day. And I'm moving on to now chapter number 15. I'm just going to see how long it is, because I think I'm going to wrap up with chapter 15. So let's wrap up here, chapter 15. Just one moment. Let me adjust myself. Okay. Chapter 15, verse number 1. And in that year there was a heavy famine throughout the land of Canaan, and all the inhabitants of the land could not remain on account of famine, for it was very grievous. And Abram and all belonging to him rose and went down to Egypt on account of the famine. And when they were at the brook of Mizrahim, they remained there some time to rest from the fatigue of the land. And Abram and Sarai were walking at the border of the brook of Mizrahim, and Abram beheld that his wife Sarai was very beautiful. And Abram said to his wife Sarai, since God has created you with such a beautiful countenance, I am afraid of the Egyptians, lest they should slay me and take you away. For the fear of God is not in these places. Surely then you will do this. Say you are my sister to all that may ask you, in order that it may be well with me, and that we may live and not be put to death. And Abram commanded the same to all those that came with him to Egypt on account of the famine. Also his nephew Lot he commanded, saying, if the Egyptians ask you concerning Sarai, say she is the sister of Abram. And yet, with all these orders, Abram did not put confidence in them, but he took Sarai and placed her in a chest and concealed it among their vessels. For Abram was greatly concerned about Sarai on account of the wickedness of the Egyptians. And Abram and all belonging to him rose up from the brook of Mizrahim and came to Egypt, and they had scarcely entered the gates of the city when the guard stood up to them, saying, give tithe to the king from what you have, and then you may come into the town. And Abram and those that were with him did so. And Abram, with the people that were with him, came to Egypt. And when they came, they brought the chest in which Sarai was concealed. And the Egyptians saw the chest, and the king's servants approached Abram, saying, what have you here in this chest, which we have not seen? Now open the chest and give tithe to the king of all that it contains. And Abram said, I will not open the chest, but all you demand on it I will give. And Pharaoh's officers answered Abram, saying, it is a chest of precious stones. Give us the tenth thereof. And Abram said, all that you desire I will give, but you must not open the chest. And the king's officers pressed Abram, and they reached the chest and opened it with force. And they saw, and behold, a beautiful woman was in the chest. And when the officers of the king beheld Sarai, they were struck with admiration at her beauty. And all the princes and servants of Pharaoh assembled to see Sarai, for she was very beautiful. And the king's officers ran and told Pharaoh all they had seen, and they praised Sarai to the king. And Pharaoh ordered her to be brought. And the woman came before the king, and Pharaoh beheld Sarai, and she pleased him exceedingly, and he was struck with her beauty. And the king rejoiced greatly on her account, and made presents to those who brought him the tidings concerning her. And the woman was then brought to Pharaoh's house, and Abram grieved on account of his wife, and he prayed to the Lord to deliver her from the hands of Pharaoh. And Sarai also prayed at the time, and said, O Lord God, you told my lord Abram to go from his land and from his father's house to the land of Canaan. And you promised to do well with him, if he would perform your commands. Now behold, we have done that which you have commanded us, and we left our land and our families, and we went to a strange land and to a people whom we have not known before. And we came to this land to avoid the famine, and this evil accident has befallen me now. Therefore, O Lord God, deliver us and save us from the hand of this oppressor, and do well with me for the sake of your mercy. And the Lord listened to the voice of Sarai, and the Lord sent a messenger to deliver Sarai from the power of Pharaoh. And the king came and sat before Sarai, and behold, a messenger of the Lord was standing over him. And he appeared to Sarai and said to her, Do not fear, for the Lord has heard your prayer. And the king approached Sarai and said to her, What is that man to you who brought you here? And she said, He is my brother. And the king said, It is incumbent on us to make him great, to elevate him, and to do to him all the good which you will command us. And at that time the king sent silver and gold and precious stones to Abram in abundance, together with cattle, men servants, and maidservants. And the king ordered Abram to be brought. And he sat in the court of the king's house. And the king greatly exalted Abram on that night. And the king approached to speak to Sarai, and he reached out his hand to touch her, when the messenger struck him heavily, and he was terrified, and he refrained from reaching to her. And when the king came near to Sarai, the messenger struck him to the ground, and acted thus to him the whole night, and the king was terrified. And on that night the messenger heavily struck all the servants of the king and his whole household on account of Sarai. And there was a great lamentation that night among the people of Pharaoh's house. And Pharaoh, seeing the evil that befell him, said, Surely on account of this woman this thing has happened to me. And he removed himself at some distance from her and spoke pleasing words to her. And the king said to Sarai, Please tell me concerning the man with whom you came here. And Sarai said, This man is my husband, and I said to you that he was my brother, for I was afraid lest you should put him to death through wickedness. And the king kept away from Sarai, and the plagues of the messenger of the Lord ceased from him and his household. And Pharaoh knew that he was smitten on account of Sarai. And the king was greatly astonished at this. And in the morning the king called for Abram and said to him, What is this you have done to me? Why did you say she's my sister, owing to which I took her to me for a wife? And this heavy plague has therefore come on me and my household. Now therefore here is your wife. Take her and go from our land, lest we all die on her account. And Pharaoh took more cattle, men servants, and maidservants, and silver and gold to give Abram. And he returned his wife Sarai to him. And the king took a maiden whom he begot by his concubines, and he gave her to Sarai for a handmaid. And the king said to his daughter, "It is better for you, my daughter, to be a handmaid in this man's house than to be mistress in my house, after we have beheld the evil that befell on account of this woman." And Abram arose, and he and all belonging to him went away from Egypt, and Pharaoh ordered some of his men to accompany him, and all that went with him. And Abram returned to the land of Canaan, to the place where he had made the altar, where he at first had pitched his tent. And Lot, the son of Haran, Abram's brother, had a heavy stock of cattle, flocks, and herds and tents, for the Lord was bountiful to them on account of Abram. And when Abram was dwelling in the land, the herdsmen of Lot quarreled with the herdsmen of Abram, for their property was too great for them to remain together in the land, and the land could not bear them on account of their cattle. And when Abram's herdsmen went to feed their flock, they would not go into the fields of the people of the land, but the cattle of Lot's herdsmen did otherwise, for they were allowed to feed in the fields of the people of the land. And the people of the land saw this occurrence daily, and they came to Abram and quarreled with him on account of Lot's herdsmen. And Abram said to Lot, "What is this you are doing to me to make me despicable to the inhabitants of the land, that you order your herdsmen to feed your cattle in the fields of other people? Do you not know that I am a stranger in this land among the children of Canaan? And why will you do this to me?" And Abram quarreled daily with Lot on account of this. But Lot would not listen to Abram, and he continued to do the same. And the inhabitants of the land came and told Abram. And Abram said to Lot, "How long will you be to me for a stumbling block with the inhabitants of the land? Now I implore you, let there no longer be quarreling between us, for we are relatives. But please separate from me. Go and choose a place where you may dwell, and your cattle and all belonging to you. But keep yourself at a distance from me, you and your household, and do not be afraid in going from me. For if anyone does harm to you, let me know, and I will avenge your cause from him. Only remove from me." And when Abram had spoken all these words to Lot, then Lot arose and lifted up his eyes toward the plain of Jordan. And he saw that the whole of this place was well watered and good for man, as well as affording pasture for cattle. And Lot went from Abram to that place, and he pitched his tent there, and he dwelt in Sodom. And they were separated from each other. And Abram dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and he pitched his tent there. And Abram remained in that place for many years. And that brings me to the end of chapter number 15. Wrapping up on page 342 for those of you who want to read ahead. And you know, I'm so grateful to the Most High Creator God for all of these blessings that He's bestowed upon me. I had such a wonderful Sabbath, and I will share some updates with you guys as we move into the new year. I'm so grateful, and I mean the Gregorian New Year, because as many of us who follow the Hebrew calendar know that our new year occurs in the spring. But yeah, I'm just so grateful to the Most High Creator God for such a wonderful Sabbath that I had last Sabbath. I got to see a lot of people who I hadn't seen for a while, was really blessed with wonderful praise and worship, and it just reminded me of how important church community, is. And also, I actually fell within the past week, and I had a huge injury, and I wanted to go and get some therapy for it, because I used to work for a physiotherapist years ago, and so I wanted to go get some therapy for it to catch it before it got really bad, because as many of you guys know, I kind of do between 8 and 10 miles a day, walking, maybe speed walking, not jogging. And so, but that fell through, and I really just sort of prayed about it, did some herbal natural remedies, and honestly it healed. And I'm telling you, it was a really, really nasty fall, and I fell on my knees, which are very arthritic, and so I was really bummed out that I couldn't get in to do some laser therapy, because I've been trained in that, and I know, time is of the essence. But the Most High Creator God fixed that for me. And these are just little battles that I fight on the daily. But I'm just so grateful to Him for helping me with those little battles so that I can do the things I need to do to take care of my family and my loved ones, and to do the things I love, which is teaching and reading ancient books such as the Apocrypha, Pseudepigrapha, Septuagint, and of course my favorite book of all time, the Holy Hebrew Bible, the Word of the Most High Creator God, the God of all gods, the God of all spirits, Yahweh, who sent His Son, Yahushua HaMashiach, to die for all of our sins. And before I say goodbye, I want to remind you that the Most High Creator God of the universe loves us because we are His children.